or resource pirates, and I was wondering about what alternatives are there for the resolution of these piracies. How can we resolve these issues, do you think?
One of the first things to note, Peter, is that the first quote-unquote Somali Pirates Acts took place in 1989. This is what we call the political pirates. There is a group called Somali National Movement, which now dominate or have dominated the northern part of that country, who were fighting a resistance war against the military dictatorship. And they were the first ones to target ships that were plying in the on the Somali coast, who were providing provisions for the Somali government. And they took those three, I think 2 or 3 ships in 1989 and 1990. And then they went out of business once the government collapsed. So the first thing to note is that there were no piracy on the Somali coast when there was a government in the country. Although there were pirates operating off the Malacca coast, where there is the government of Indonesia, Singapore and Malaysia, and so on and so forth. In the sort of a Gulf or Bay of Bengal between India and Pakistan, Bangladesh, the governments of India exist, the government of Bangladesh exists, but pirates operate there. If you look at Nigeria on the west coast, that's exactly the case. If you look at Colombian coast, that's the case. So the only place where pirates appeared after the collapse of the state is Somalia. And there you can see what the solution is. If you have a Somali state of the kind that can sort of be sovereign dominant over its territory, there will be absolutely no pirates. So the international community, to resolve this issue, in my assessment, is to support the Somali people, put a state together that's of their own and that's accountable to them. I'm quite confident if that assistance is given for Somalis to do that, then the piracy of the coast of the Horn of Africa will be eliminated quite quickly.
Can you assess the impact of Western and particularly U.S. and perhaps British reporting on Somalia for us? It seems to me that what most Americans know about Somalia comes from, Black Hawk Down, for instance, with all its problems. But it seems like the media coverage has really shaped the perceptions that people have of Somalia today, so that they're unable to see the political and the economic dimensions. And I think it's important for various reasons. It seems to me this is how one can justify the intervention of, for example, the Navy of the United States and many other countries that are now patrolling, right, the coasts off of Somalia, even though it's been rather ineffective in stopping this, right? So can you tell me about the media coverage and your perception of it, interpretation of it, and also how maybe it plays into the international response to the crisis in the Horn?
There are 2 ways to sort of skin that question. One is the media coverage of the piracy, the other is the media coverage of the political process or lack thereof in the country. But before I go into either of these things, I think it's important for particularly American citizens to know the amount of money we spend on this project. There is a base in Djibouti, neighboring state, where we have a base with the French and the Germans and everybody else. The cost of that minimally is $500 million a year, minimally. It may be actually approaching $1 billion. And if you see what the cost of the ransom pirates is, then there's a great deal of proportionality missing here. $1 billion first the cost, less than $100 million by the pirates. And I got this sort of a quote from a colleague of mine that the number of cars, the cost of the number of cars that are hijacked and stolen in the United States, what the ransom pirates take is 1% of the cost of the cars that are stolen in the United States per year. We don't send the Marines to the streets to make sure that those cars are stolen, because it doesn't make any sense. So the kind of reporting that takes place, one doesn't cover that at all. The cost to the United States of these operations, and to the Europeans for that matter, why they are doing this, given the fact that the cost-benefit analysis tells us that this is nonsense, nonsensical. So that's one report. The second element that we don't hear about is the fact that Somalis are said to be clan people or tribalistic, and that this clan is at loggerheads with this clan and so loggerheads with this clan. If we were to use that kind of analysis covering the United States, we will become the ultimate racists in this country. So the Polish cannot see eye to eye with the Norwegians, the Germans cannot see eye to eye, American Norwegians, Polish Americans, and so on and so forth, black Americans, and so on and so forth. But we are able to say that about other people and are not kept accountable. So the image the population in the United States get from this reporting is a country in which people are Byzantine, they hate one another, and therefore there is no possibility that this is a political question that must be resolved politically. That's the first part. The second part is about what our involvement is here. We are supposed to be helping Somalis. Our interventions are supposed to help Somalis. But my assessment of the last 20 years, at least the last 20 years, is that our interventions has been actually to subvert Somali civic agendas that are trying to put Humpty Dumpty back together. For instance, there was a time in 2006, after Mogadishu has been in mayhem for 16 years, that a group of Somali religious people got together, called the Union of the Islamic Courts. I was in Mogadishu debating with them at that point, trying to help them think through the issues. And then I met with our Assistant Secretary of State at that point in time, Dr. Jendai Fraser. What I saw these people were trying to do is, first of all, they chased the warlords out of the city. So the city was at peace at last without any help or any support from the international community. It appeared to me when I met with the Assistant Secretary that we were quite unhappy about the peace that has been restored in the country. And hence they gave the green light to the Ethiopian government, who are our allies, to go and intervene and demolish that. This is how Al-Shabaab, the so-called terrorist group, came to the surface. So it's as if our own either bad policy or ill intentions have produced the crisis of terrorism today, which we are sort of deeply engaged on. It's as if we needed to create these people to be able to fight them. That's the image that the reporters provide to American citizens, which in my opinion belies the facts on the ground.
Coming back to that